All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a topic that's, well, a little hush-hush.
Definitely.
We're going to explore what happens when you don't ejaculate. We're talking biology, the psychology, even some societal stuff. It's going to be fascinating, trust me. And our guide for this deep dive, a recent article from health.com. They covered a lot of ground on this one.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. Ejaculation is this natural process, but there's so much mystery and even anxiety around it.
Absolutely. Okay, so first things first, let's get the basics out of the way. What exactly are we talking about when we say ejaculation?
Well, simply put, it's when semen is expelled from the penis during orgasm.
Okay, straightforward enough. But the question is, why wouldn't someone ejaculate? I mean, there's got to be a reason, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The reasons can be super diverse. Some people might choose not to for religious reasons, personal beliefs, or maybe it's part of a spiritual thing.
Yeah, makes sense. And then there are those who might not be able to ejaculate because of a medical condition.
Right, exactly.
The health.com article actually goes into a few of those medical reasons, like delayed ejaculation, where someone struggles to ejaculate, might even find it impossible. I saw a comparison somewhere. It's like trying to start a car and the engine just keeps turning over, but it won't catch.
It's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of different things that can cause that, from hormone problems to stuff going on with the nerves. Even some medications can have that side effect.
Wow, I had no idea. Then there's retrograde ejaculation. They called it a dry orgasm in the article. Ever felt like you had an orgasm but nothing came out? That could be it, where the semen goes back into the bladder instead of being released.
Yeah, that can happen because of things like diabetes, some medications, or even after certain surgeries.
Oh, wow. And an ejaculation, that's another one the article mentioned. It's where someone can't ejaculate during sex, but they might be able to during sleep or, masturbation.
Right, and the causes for that can range from spinal cord injuries to multiple sclerosis, even psychological factors. Things like anxiety or guilt can play a role.
It's incredible how many different factors are involved. And of course, as we age, things change for everyone. The article mentioned that, men can produce sperm their whole lives, but getting an eruption and an ejaculation might become more difficult over time. Kind of like menopause for women, I guess.
Exactly. It's a natural part of aging.
All right, so we've talked about why someone might not ejaculate. Now let's get to the good stuff, the myths and misconceptions. Like, what about blue balls? Is that a real thing, or is it just, locker room talk?
Well, you might experience some discomfort if you're aroused and don't release, but blue balls is a bit of an exaggeration.
Okay, good to know.
It's not dangerous or anything, and any discomfort usually goes away on its own.
That's a relief. Another myth the article debunked is that not ejaculating is somehow harmful.
Right. There's really no scientific basis for that. The body is pretty amazing. It breaks down and reabsorbs unejaculated sperm. No buildup, no damage.
So no sperm overload to worry about. Speaking of side effects, the article did say that research on this is still pretty limited. But from what they've found, there don't seem to be any major physical downsides to not ejaculating. But what about the psychological stuff? I imagine that's a whole other can of worms.
You're absolutely right. It can really vary. Some people say they feel more mentally clear, maybe even experience a kind of spiritual boost when they don't ejaculate.
Interesting.
But others, they might feel frustrated, irritable, or even a little anxious. It really depends on the person and what's going on in their life.
It makes sense. It's not just about the physical stuff. It's about how our minds and emotions are tied into all of it.
Exactly. And if you're dealing with a disorder that affects ejaculation, the psychological impact can be even more intense. You might feel like you're not good enough or worry about your relationship, have performance anxiety. That can be really tough to deal with.
Yeah, sounds like it. Definitely seems like getting professional help would be important in those cases.
Absolutely. There are treatments and therapies out there that can really help.
Now, here's where things get really interesting. The article talks about potential benefits of both ejaculating and not ejaculating. It's like weighing the pros and cons of two different paths.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, for sure.
Okay, so first up, not ejaculating. The article says it can sometimes be recommended for fertility purposes. I've heard that holding back can boost fertility, and it seems there's some truth to that. Abstaining for a few days can increase sperm count and volume, like you're building up a reserve or something.
That's the idea. But the research on whether this actually improves the quality of the sperm, how well it moves and its shape, which are super important for fertilization, well, It's not really clear yet.
So not a guaranteed fertility boost, but something to think about. Now, on the other hand, ejaculation itself has some benefits, right?
Yeah, things like stress reduction, feeling happier, even some pain relief.
Wow, I didn't realize it had that many perks. And wait, the article mentioned something about frequent ejaculation being linked to a lower risk of prostate cancer?
Yes. There was a study in 2016 that found a correlation between ejaculating more often and a reduced risk of prostate cancer. Pretty interesting, right?
So wait, should we all be aiming for a certain number per week or something? Sounds like a lot to keep track of.
Well, hold on. Just because there's a correlation doesn't mean one causes the other. It could be other factors involved.
Oh, right. That makes sense.
So more research is definitely needed, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Now let's tackle another question I'm sure is on everyone's minds. Can you ejaculate too much? Is there such a thing?
People ask that all the time. And from what we know about the body, the answer is no.
Really? So even daily, multiple times a day, it's fine. That seems like a lot. Are you sure there are no downsides?
Physiologically speaking, your body can handle it. But you bring up a good point. We can't just look at what the body can do. It's about how it makes you feel mentally and emotionally too.
True.
Right. So it's not just about pushing your body to the limit.
What about the whole sex addiction thing? I've had some people worry about that, especially with frequent ejaculation.
It's important to understand that, while excessive masturbation or sexual activity can be a symptom of sex addiction, it's not considered a cause. If someone's feeling overwhelmed or their behavior is causing problems, that's when professional help is really important.
Makes sense. The article also mentioned something called sexual desensitization, which can happen with a lot of masturbation.
Right.
Basically, it can make it harder to get aroused or have an orgasm during other types of sexual activity.
Yeah, that's something to be mindful of. It's all about finding a healthy balance and, paying attention to how our habits affect our overall sexual well-being.
Well, this deep dive has already been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered a lot, from the biology of ejaculation to all the psychological and societal stuff that comes into play.
Yeah, it's been fascinating, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And it really shows how important it is to approach these topics with open minds and a willingness to learn.
Absolutely. Stay tuned, everyone, because in part 2, we'll be delving even deeper into this fascinating world of ejaculation and how it all affects our health and well-being.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've covered a lot, but there's still so much to unpack, right?
I know, right? It's amazing how something so natural can be so, complex. And honestly, I'm really interested in getting into some of those, societal and personal beliefs that shape how we view all of this.
Yeah, that's a great point. The article didn't go too deep into that, but it's definitely worth thinking about, right? Societal expectations, they can really influence how we see our own bodies and experiences.
Totally. How much does our culture, shape how we think about ejaculation and sexual health in general? It feels like there's still so much stigma, it's hard to even talk about it openly.
Oh, absolutely. And that lack of open communication, it can really prevent people from seeking help or even just understanding themselves better.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. I'm curious about celibacy. I mean, it's a personal choice, obviously, but how does it all tie in with what we've been talking about?
So celibacy, whether it's for religious reasons, personal reasons, or even health reasons, is basically abstaining from sexual activity. That usually means intercourse, and often masturbation, too. It's a voluntary decision to not ejaculate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's super important to respect that choice, whatever the reasons behind it.
For sure. We're not here to judge anyone. And while the article we're looking at didn't really go deep into celibacy, it did mention that some people choose not to ejaculate as part of, spiritual or religious practices.
Right. For some, it's about connecting with, a higher power, maybe deepening their spiritual connection, or even finding inner peace. And for others, it might be about focusing their energy on different things, personal growth or creative stuff.
I can see that. Oh, the article also mentioned something called semen retention. Ever heard of that?
Yeah, semen retention has become kind of popular lately. A lot of people claim it has all these health benefits like more energy, better focus, even increased strength. And some say it even boosts your spiritual awareness.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot. But is there any science to back that up?
That's where things get a little fuzzy. There are a lot of personal stories, but not a ton of solid research to support all those claims. It's more of a belief system than a scientifically proven thing right now.
So take those claims with a grain of salt, right? And stick to evidence-based information when making decisions about our health.
Definitely. And remember, everyone's different. What works for one person might not work for another.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about something a bit more concrete. The article mentioned nocturnal emissions, wet dreams. What exactly are those, and why do they happen?
Basically, a nocturnal emission is an involuntary ejaculation during sleep, usually with erotic dreams, like unintentional orgasms, really. They're completely normal, totally natural, and happen most often during adolescence and young adulthood, though they can happen at any age. You usually have fewer as you get older.
Oh man, I remember being so embarrassed about those when I was younger. Like, it was something you weren't supposed to talk about.
Yeah, a lot of secrecy and shame around these topics, unfortunately. Makes these things feel awkward. But honestly, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just the body doing its thing.
So if someone's, intentionally trying not to ejaculate, does having a wet dream kind of reset the clock?
That's a good question, and I think the answer depends on how someone interprets it. Biologically, it's just an ejaculation, even if it's not intentional.
Okay, that makes sense. So say someone's not ejaculating for a long time, whether it's by choice or because of a medical reason, what happens to the sperm? Does it just build up?
Nope, the body's got it covered.
Yeah.
It just breaks it down and reabsorbs it. No sperm overload, no worries.
Good to know. The article did say that some people experience psychological effects from abstaining. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, but remember, it's different for everyone. Some people might feel more clear-headed, energetic, even more spiritual. Others might feel frustrated, irritable, or anxious. It all depends on the person, Their beliefs, societal expectations, even their mental health can play a role.
So no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to the mental and emotional side of not ejaculating.
Exactly. Listen to your body, pay attention to how you feel, and if anything feels off, talk to a professional.
And speaking of mental health, the article mentioned that some people with ejaculation-related disorders can experience stress or anxiety about sex.
Right, that's important to acknowledge. Things like delayed ejaculation or anejaculation, they can really affect someone's life, lead to feelings of inadequacy, shame, even problems in their relationships.
Sounds like seeking help is crucial in those cases.
Absolutely. There are treatments and therapies out there that can make a huge difference.
Okay, let's flip the script again and talk about frequent ejaculation. We touched on this earlier, but is there really such a thing as too much?
It comes up a lot. And the answer, if we're just talking about the body, is no. There's no evidence that frequent ejaculation is bad for you.
So even multiple times a day is okay. I know we talked about this before, but are there any downsides, even if it's not physically harmful?
Well, you're right to question that. Even though your body can physically handle it, it's important to think about the mental and emotional side. Some people might experience fatigue or skin irritation, from frequent masturbation. Some even feel guilty or ashamed.
Right. It's all about finding a balance that feels right for you, mind and body.
Exactly. If you're feeling pressure to ejaculate a lot, or if it's messing with your life or relationships, talk to a doctor or therapist.
The article also mentioned a potential link between frequent ejaculation and lower risk of prostate cancer. That's a pretty big deal, right?
It is. There have been studies, including the one in the article, that suggest a connection. But, and this is important, just because two things are linked doesn't mean one causes the other. We need more research to be sure.
So more to learn, but definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
Wow, this deep dive has been so informative. I feel like I've learned a ton about the biology, the psychology, all the factors that come into play.
It really is fascinating, right? And it shows how important it is to be open-minded and keep learning.
All right, folks, before we wrap up, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll highlight the key takeaways and leave you with some final thoughts to chew on.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into ejaculation. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've covered so much, from biology to myths to all those psychological and societal things.
It really has. And I hope everyone listening feels like they've learned a thing or two, and feels more empowered to understand this whole process.
I think so too. So before we wrap up, let's go over some of the big takeaways. What do you really want our listeners to remember? Well, I think the most important thing is that not ejaculating for a while, whether it's by choice or because of some medical reason, isn't going to hurt you. Our bodies are pretty incredible at adapting.
Yeah. And like we talked about, the body just reabsorbs that sperm. No buildup, no damage. I think a lot of people worry about that for no reason.
Exactly. And while there might be some differences in how people react psychologically, the science is pretty clear that there aren't any serious physical side effects.
And we also learn that frequent ejaculation, even multiple times a day, isn't harmful either. I have to admit, I was a little surprised by that one.
It's a pretty common myth, that it'll drain your energy or lead to health problems. But turns out your body can handle it just fine.
But of course, we did talk about listening to your body and watching out for any signs of fatigue or irritation. Finding that balance is key.
Couldn't agree more.
Oh, and that research about a possible link between frequent ejaculation and a lower risk of prostate cancer, that was pretty mind-blowing.
It was. But it's important to remember that we need more research before we can say for sure if one causes the other. It's an exciting area to explore, though.
Yeah, for sure. In the meantime, it's all about taking care of yourself, getting those regular checkups, and doing those screenings your doctor recommends.
Absolutely. Prevention and early detection are so important.
I think one of the biggest things I've taken away from this whole deep dive is that everyone's different. There's no right or wrong way to experience sexuality, and comparing ourselves to others just isn't helpful.
I completely agree. What matters is finding what feels good and healthy for you, both physically and emotionally.
And talking about it, having open and honest conversations with our partners, doctors, and even ourselves.
Communication is key. It helps break down all that stigma and shame that surrounds these topics and allows us to make informed decisions.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of ejaculation. We hope you found it informative and got you thinking a bit.
Remember, knowledge is power. Understanding our bodies is crucial for both physical and mental well-being.
Keep those conversations going, everyone. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive.